but it's becoming a real challenge, finding people out there that wants to work in a feed mill. It's always being it's always a big opportunity. So we have to rely, especially in Europe, relying a lot more into automation, having a lot of more less personnel, and relying a lot more into the automation, into data-driven more decisions than anything.
Welcome to this episode of the Feed Science Podcast Show, brought to you by Genetics. My name is Wilmer Pacheco. I am an associate professor in the Department of Poultry Science at Auburn University. My guest today is Cesar Menendez. Cesar is the director of feed manufacturing and bakery operations in Smithfield Foods. I had the pleasure to work with Cesar back in, in 2008, 2007. When Cesar was an intern in the feed mill in Laurinburg, North Carolina. At that time, I was the night shift supervisor. How are you, Cesar? How are you doing?
Doing good, Wilmer. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here, and glad that this ended up working out and here having this good conversation. So looking forward. Again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Cesar, and for us it's a pleasure to have you back in this Feed Science Podcast Show. We learned a lot from your previous episode, but if you don't mind, Cesar, could you introduce yourself and how do you get into the current role?
Absolutely, yes. So, Wilmer, I started, as you mentioned, back in 2000 and 2008. Stepping back a little bit, so I grew up in eastern Guatemala, and then later on, after finish high school, I want to get into agriculture, but was not 100% sure what I specifically want to do. Becoming from a farm, my parents farming in Guatemala, I did know that I enjoy a lot the part of feeding the animals more than anything else. So as I went there, I had the opportunity to go to college in Honduras, in Zamorano, where we originally met. Then, as I was in Zamorano, find myself a lot of passion into feed milling with the small feed mill there in the university. So that's kind of where I started. Spend quite a bit of time there with Dr. Professor Moncada. And have a great experience. And I thought that that's kind of the field where I want to be focused and as I grow in my career. And then as I finished in college, the opportunity came along of an internship with Murphy Brown LLC at that time, which is part of Smithfield Foods today. And came to the U.S. That's what I got glad to meet you. You were working at the Laurinburg feed mill, and I always been thankful for that opportunity that you were there, because I think you recognized me looking for the opportunity in getting there, and you give me the opportunity to start working in the feed mill. And we do enjoy that part. So as I spend my time in the Laurinburg feed mill, later on in my time, I had the opportunity to become a manager of the facility, and that went for about 7-8 years. And as that went on, I had the opportunity to move into the corporate world, with working with all our feed mills across the United States, also working with at that point with our 2 feed mills as well in Mexico. So spent some time in Mexico and in the U.S. With all our facilities at that moment, 15 facilities, all at that moment focused on continuous improvement, capital investments of feed mills, and as well what I call the most important part, the development of what I call the next generation of feed mill managers. So we working with developing young talent into the feed milling world to become future managers in our company. Very recently, I got the opportunity to move into a full operations. So now responsible for all our feed mills in the United States. It's as well We have two bakeries where we make a bakery meal. So 13 females across the U.S., a lot of tons every day, a lot of trucks. We have to make sure that they leave our females and make sure that they hit our farms. And that's what it's been now, almost going into 16 years since that time, Wilmer. So time flies for sure, and a lot of good opportunities. I got a good learning so far up to date.
Yeah, and it feels like yesterday, right, Cesar? But like something that is unique about you, and you can bring a new perspective because you, as you're mentioning, you have had the opportunity to work with different feed mills in different regions in the U.S., but also in Latin America. And I know that you have also had the opportunity to travel to Europe for training and to visit feed mills. So, where do you see the main opportunities when you go and visit feed mills, not only here in the US, but also abroad?
Yes, that's a very good question, Wilmer. I think there is always one thing that I have found very interesting. And when you look into running a feed mill in Latin America or Mexico, it is different as you run it in the United States and, of course, as it is Europe. I think one of the things that I have noticed myself, especially as you go to Europe, and there's also some difference between the Western Europe and the Eastern part of Europe, as you will realize that. But there is something in common that everybody it's being challenging with not having a way to find people to work in field mills. So every time as I looked at, it sounds to be a very popular problem and issue that we have started facing, and the Europeans kind of had it on a lot more early than where probably we have seen it in the US and probably as it is in Latin America. But it's becoming a real challenge, finding people out there that wants to work in a field mill. It's always a big opportunity. So we have to rely, especially in Europe, relying a lot more into automation, having a lot of less personnel, and relying a lot more into the automation, into data-driven more decisions than anything. As compared to probably where we are today in most places, maybe in the US and of course in Latin America, a little bit behind that. But it's been a big opportunity from what I have seen. It is educating operators, working with and specializing the few people that you have in the feed mill, teach them properly, help them for continuous improvement, and providing training for continuous improvement what they do in their facility, so they can they can take more on the challenges that they face in the business on a day-to-day, and to be able to also properly maintain the equipment. So personnel is a big thing. Focus into automation is of course the next big thing to that, to compensate with having less people in the feed mills. So when you look Europeans, especially on the western part where I have been the chance or the opportunity to be in quite a bit of good number of feed mills, is what I see. Very limited people working, but the limited people working in these feed mills is very high skilled people and very well trained, where the ongoing training and support and continuous improvement is a day-to-day thing for them, to be able to know that there is less people. So they have to understand a lot more specifically. They have to have the proper training to affront into the issues and the opportunities, and for them to, of course, to run a very efficient feed mill. I think in the US, we're heading that direction because we don't going to have a lot of more choices here very near in the future. Every day we have a lot of less people that wants to work in feed mills. We continue operating, and a lot of these facilities were built in these towns where there is not necessarily a lot of big population. So finding capable people becomes more limited. So we have to begin embracing on a lot of more automation, as a lot of most places in Europe have been doing it. I think Latin America, you still have in certain places, especially, there is still the opportunity to find capable people, to find people that those wants to work in the feed mill, especially if that feed mill is one of the only or largest facilities maybe that operates in a small town. There is people that see it as a good opportunity to go to work or to do a career in the future. But it's not necessarily the case as we are in the US. And of course, in certain places as well in Latin America, it's going to be a challenge that it's going to be faced. So again, automation, Wilmer, is the big thing based on the main type of opportunity that I see, that I see, especially when you look Europe in the US.
Yeah, and I see, like in the US, and I mean, we have both work in the US, and you still, see people, one operator running, like the grinding system, the mixing, and then 3 or 4 lines of pelleting. In Latin America, you got somebody just doing grinding, another one's
Yeah.
doing mixing, and someone just, sometimes you got one person per pelleting line. But as you're saying, is very important, right? And I think we relied a lot on sensors because you are in front of the computer, and then if something happens in that facility, then you know where the problem is occurring. So you can just call the maintenance guy. Okay, I'm having a problem
Yeah.
after this elevator. Can you check what is going on? And one of the things that I would like to know, Cesar, is like, because you go to different feed mills, when you go and enter the control room, are there like any specific things that you look?
So that's a good question, Wilmer. And I wanna, before I answer that specific question, I wanna add to your comment because I think you make a very good comment, and I think that's gonna possible add more to what you just say. One important thing is Wilmer. When I go, if I go to a female in Latin America, there is normally you will see. I would always think a very kind of large number of people working in the field because there is a lot of more manual process and nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying what is wrong, what is bad. It's just because the conditions allow, you have the opportunity, a lot of more people in housekeeping, a lot of more people in maintenance, because of course you might side in that town that you are in an island and there is not many people capable to help you, to support you. So you gotta have the manpower to do that. When you go to the US, that number cut kind of in half, if not even further more down, there is a lot of more less people.
Mhm.
But if I walk into a female in Western Europe, for example, I see normally working maybe 3 people. So I walk into one of these females one time. He's an integrator. And I asked him, how many people working today in the female? And he said, I got 3, and me is 4. And I say, wow. And this is a female that it was making close to 500,000 tons of feed, short tons of feed a year. So I'm like, wow, 3 people working today. And he said, yeah, normally 3, at night we have 2 people. And I'm like, wow. So what they do? And he said, well, they do everything. They do maintenance, but they also know how to run into the system. And there is something interesting as I work. Is say one of them is changing a die today. And as I walk into it, this guy, he knows how to change a die. He changes the die there by himself. Of course, he has all the tools, all the equipment you're talking about. Is normally those are 20 inches or 16 inches small dies on commercial feed mills. But he has also a computer or a screen right beside that computer with him, where he's also not just because he's finishing changing the die, he has the tools, of course, to do it by himself, but he has the screen right on him to make the adjustments that he needs to do for that machine. He's not relying on anything else. He has control of everything right where he's at. So to your point in what you just say, it's depending, of course, of the area, but as you rely more in automation, in sensors, in all that, in a capable people or high skilled trained people, you had it right there. You're looking at there. To going back to your question of what I look when I go into a control room, Wilmer, I think that there is something very important I will say that I always want to see is how many tons per hour they're running and what is the horsepower of that machine.
Mhm.
Because that always gives me to think how much is that there in the female, how much effort they put in to make that pellet. If it's a pellet, because it's what my wheelhouse is of course pelleting. It's knowing that how much effort they are doing to make that pellet, how much energy they're spending, and how efficiently they run in that machine. Because I always get mindset on between running a poultry feed mill or a hog feed mill. Sometimes not necessarily there's too much of a difference on how you run that tons per hour as compared to your horsepower on that pellet mill. But when you go to a commercial, there is a lot of more horsepower per tons per hour. So you're looking into because you're focused into making a really good pellet, and then that gives me an idea to say, wow, I'm this feed mill, we're spending this much to make this pellet. If I'm integrated and I see the same, I always challenge is, did you really getting the value you're thinking by running a more or less efficient feed mill? As you maybe you don't want to maximize it for being more efficient. Maybe going to a more thinner die or lower, thicker die to maybe conserve some energy at the expense of running a more efficient feed mill and possible a more efficient operation. So that's one of the main things. But another thing, Wilmer, to mention when I see is I always look at the number of people in that control room. And it has always amazed me that it depends where you're at, either Latin America or the United States, in our feed mills or in Europe, it's less and less. So as we start down in Latin America, sometimes, of course, I'm not talking to the where I've been is a little bit more people because it's quality there involved, it's transportation there, the female operator is there, it may be somebody from safety is there. So there is more people. As I come to the US, the number gets less. And as I go into Europe, in certain places, there is no people. There everybody's working because it's only 2 or 3 people. There is not really nobody in that control room. Everybody does everything. Everybody walks around it. Everybody looks at something. Everybody does a maintenance or takes a work order or takes a sample, analyze and make decisions or send those decisions to the other people that is maybe in an office somewhere else, making decisions based on those samples or what they're seeing in the field mill. So that is one of those things, the top 2 things that I can mention to you what I normally look.
And just out of curiosity, because I haven't been in any feed mills in Europe yet, but do you know like if those feed mills can also run the panel from the phone? So like like the responsible of the control room can be in another area, but instead of checking from a computer what's going on, if that person can just log into the phone and see exactly what is happening and even change the parameters in a pellet mill.
Absolutely, yes. It still depends the level of automation you have. I've seen it in different cases. Most cases, the most common thing I have seen it is that at every floor level there is a screen showing you what's the status of the feed mill and how it's running that feed mill. So that as you walk into a different floor, you see, oh, there is a screen or there is a light that is giving an alarm, and I just come here and see what is the alarm and having going on, and then I make that decision. I don't have to run to the control room. I don't have to call anybody on a radio. I can make that decision right then. I've seen it as well, especially on maintenance, people carrying a tablet that connects to the wireless of the plant or directly to the PLC, for them to make decisions if they have to go to the top of the elevator to check on something. So they can control everything and make a decision from there. Cell phones, yes, it's not necessarily very popular in today's world when it comes because of cyber security and the concerns are real. So I always say you got to be a little bit careful with that. But it's all possible. Always depends on the level of type of automation. Everything now, as you know, there is this many tools. The one that comes up to my point is Ignition as the software that does the interface between the of course the user and the equipment, and the PLCs, and you have a web-based now screens or workstations that you can easily access primarily anywhere for that feed mill. So, but again, the most popular is at every level of that feed mill. You will see a screen in these feed mills that anybody or a light that will alert you. And I think that's something that we want them to become a lot more popular than relying of people sitting in the control room all the time just watching the same thing on the computer.
Yeah, and I think that's especially important when you are batching, right? Because you can see like the how you are adding the ingredients. If you got like an ingredient that it doesn't have any flow, or maybe if you
Yeah.
add more of one ingredient, and then you need to accept that variation or not. But You brought another point when you were talking, like how many tons per hour is a particular feed mill running, and a lot of that is going to be related to the LD, or the compression ratio in the pellet die. And something that people always ask me when we discuss, pellet die, is like, how many tons can you run through a diet? I don't know if you can give us some insights on that regard.
It's always a good question. I always tell people it depends what type of a species or feed type we are making. Even in between the same species, like for example in pigs, you always gonna have this different set of diets that goes to the age of the pig, as you know that that are more challenging than otherwise. So for us, a nursery diet or a pre-starter diet is a very challenging diet to run as you compare it to a grower or a finisher diet. No? So in my thoughts is always I tell that, in my opinion, is as easy the diet is, meaning normal inclusion of alternative ingredients in a normal corn ratio diet, where you normally don't see it as a challenging diet to run, where you can say this is what this diet is the best to run, is what I always call it. That is like for me what I call the T max. That's the most efficient diet I have in my feed mill, and that's what I can achieve if I would have that diet. Everything else for me below that, if it runs below that top diet, is a constraint, and it's part to me of a reason of why I'm not necessarily very efficient. So to put that in perspective, normally I would say what we see, and especially on pigs, in focusing on a lot on quality with alternative ingredients, I would say normally, to give an idea, a rough idea, but again, various. I always tell people, because I'm telling you this is what it should last you a die, it doesn't mean necessarily applies to you, because there is a lot of different variations, ingredients, in quality, moisture, a lot of things that are involved into that. But normally I say between 100 and 120,000 tons on a finisher feed diet, or grower to finish it, the ones that run very well, are normally where I would say is a good number of tonnage. But I will also say that if you have challenging diet, that will drastically drop down. So that means that diet might have to change more often if you're running challenging diets that are running a much lower efficiency than your top diet. And that means that diet maybe has to last maybe a half of the tonnage of normally that diet will run. So that means that, yes, besides it's a very expensive diet because of the ingredients, it's also expensive to run it because you got it's wear more parts more often, so you have a higher cost of replacement, because you rotating those diets a lot more often as you will if you have a finisher diet. But I would always tell people, I say, there is always people say, well, because it lasts, so I'm telling you, should last 100, 120 on a finisher, 120,000 tons on a finisher diet, whatever that's that number. I say don't necessarily base it on that. Base it of looking into, for example, your kilowatt an hour. If I am spending now more energy to make that pellet, and I'm finding a lot more difficult to make that pellet, it maybe it's time to change it. Because if you're tracking it over time on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, that should tell you at some point where you now start spending a lot more. The other thing is, besides that, is also the throughput, which it comes along with energy, right? Because it's taking you longer to make that. But once you see a sudden drop, you don't need to wait for that bill, for the utility bill, or for you to capture that number and put it in the spreadsheet. You can look at it on a daily basis by talking to the operator and saying, "Hey, look, my tons per hour are drastically start dropping. What it has changed? Do my temp now? I have more challenging to add more temperature into the feed. Yes, I have. I can now add a lot of more temperatures I was having yesterday or the day before, and it's changing. And as you see in that trends of you having a more challenge to make that with the same diet, knowing that necessarily nothing has changed, your moisture is consistent, that you look into the diet phase and you don't necessarily see it, but you're seeing it on the motor because it's telling you that it's taking more longer or it's having hard time to achieve temperature. It maybe it's time for you to change it, because then you change it. Actually, you're thinking, oh, it's going to be another diet. It's going to cost us this much. Well, yeah, but it's already costing you to run it longer and you are delaying it more. Also, some people, and I believe too, is pellet quality. They sometimes trying to start seeing it that not necessarily they will see a change on immediately on a change of throughput or hard time to put temperature into it. If not, they immediately start saying a loss on pellet quality. That either you call it feeder fines or the PDIs. That change, when that change, now you are actually as well impacting not just if your focus is with quality, where you may be impacting the performance of the animals. So that costing also a lot of more money too as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
And once you start seeing those type of things, then maybe it's a good time for you to proceed and make the changes of the diet. So that's just I think three top things that I see commonly out there, Wilmer, when it comes to diets.
And something, Cesar, that I like to go and check the dice too, because
It's a good question. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah,
if you see pieces of metal,
absolutely.
that can tell you that, okay, there is a problem with the magnets, or I don't know what else you check. When you have like an incrustation of metals, because that also
Yeah,
can create, like more vibration in the machine. So besides checking the magnets, what other suggestions do you have for us?
absolutely, Wilmer. That's thank you for bringing that coming up, because that brings up another good thing. Besides that, is it's always the physical inspection or the visual inspection of the die and the equipment is very important. There is something, Wilmer, I only find very common when I hear about we changing dies left and right. We cracking dies, so we breaking the dies. There is one question I always ask: how is your feed cleaner? Or what you call the gyro in some places. But I call it the feed cleaner. That equipment that it sits between the mixer in your mash bin before it goes into your pellet mill. It's, in my opinion, one of the most important equipments for you to maintain the life and to extend the life of that die, because that will help you to capture some of those pieces of metal that the magnet are not necessarily will be able to do. Like stainless steel,
Mhm.
the magnet will not do anything of that. But your feed cleaner does. Your feed cleaner can help you if you find the right size or the right, depends on your particle size, of course, but your size of your screen on your feed cleaner is so important and critical in the condition of it. And a lot of times when I see people telling me we're changing dies or we have a problem, we keep having a lot of metal in the die, or we crack a die because there was a metal and something went into the face of the die, I always say, how's your feed cleaner running? And I can tell you that 99% of the time that feed cleaner is not running right, or that feed cleaner had a hole in nobody on the screen and nobody find it in time, or something bypassed it at some point. There is even cases that even the manager was aware that maintenance put out of service that feed cleaner and bypassed the feed because something was missing or they didn't have a part. Now somebody forgot about to order the part and it's another problem. So my opinion, that's one of those top things that you need to have or you need to look at when it comes to a life, looking at the life of the die, Wilmer. So good point. Thanks for bringing that up. But I'm glad we brought it up so we don't forget. 'Cause I think that's important.
Yeah, because I was not paying a lot of attention, and I'm going to start paying a lot of attention. And I will also invite everybody listening to this episode to go and pay a lot of attention to the feed cleaners, because typically when I see more metal in the die, I pay a lot of attention to the magnets. But now I'm going to pay more attention to the feed cleaner, Cesar.
Yeah, the magnet is very important, Wilmer. But as you know, we just don't get black steel. It's a stainless steel. A lot of facilities are familiar with that, and that doesn't gonna do anything. And most times when you see those pieces of metal stuck to the die, I can bet you test it. It's probably a sort of stainless steel in there. So that's why I think it's important. It's so critical that feed cleaner, and you find it. You sometimes won't believe how many times that feed cleaner is being bypassed or it's not properly working.
Yeah, another thing, and it's not completely related to feed cleaners too, but I think people needs to check, and it happens to me too, Cesar, is that they are using feed screeners to remove the fines and repel the fines.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there are holes in the feed screener too, and then they are returning pellets back to the pellet mill. So
Absolutely, and you can easily detect that, because you should see your efficiency drastically go down if you're paying attention on your tons per hour. If you know normally where you should be, and now you are being on today, it sounds like it's taking longer, and you actually can see, okay, I started at this time, and now I am here an hour later than what normally would have taken me before. Something is wrong with that feed cleaner. I bet you're sending some pellets back, and you're reworking a lot of this feed, and now you are creating other type of issues, right? If you have an enzyme, or you are using a diet that requires a certain level of vitamins, now you might compromising those vitamins or some of those nutrients, because now you are reprocessing. If your conditioning is longer, it just creates another issue. Now you might gonna be impacting as well performance in the animals down in the field. Good point. Very good point.
Yeah, also like something that at least works for me too, Cesar, is to have like a bypass valve in the pipe that is returning the fines back to the feeder, because you can collect a sample there, and if you have pellets there,
Absolutely.
then you got a hole in the feed screener.
Yeah.
But like going back to the pellet dye, and we will it's gonna be one of my last questions. I see more, and we were talking about technology, people using remote adjustment of the rolls.
Mm-hmm.
But I have heard, like positive and negative opinions. Some people don't like them completely because the operators might tie the rolls too tight. Do you have any advice about like how to go about, because it's a good tool? How do you use it properly?
It's actually a great tool. I do agree with you, but I think that as more evolving automation, and more we will rely into the automation to utilize the automatic roll adjustment, better it's probably going to be. But I think it's a matter of education. It's one of those things that it goes back into what we start talking about. As you know, we face in the future, or some places already facing challenges of hiring people where we operate. These people that you have to train them properly to be able to utilize these devices, because this device, if you don't necessarily have the proper training, if you don't necessarily know what you are actually doing, you can immediately create a major issue. And we see that happening more and more often. And a lot of people, you've seen it in the industry, especially in the US, that have decided to not use it anymore. They just take it out and go back to manual adjustment, because the manual adjustment gets to have the people to be at the machine, to be there, to look into it, to pay attention, and to follow a specific, simple SOP to say, this is the point, or this is a piece of paper you use to adjust that roll so you don't touch that piece of paper, able to go back and forth. So you have a direct interaction. The biggest thing is what we talk about it is, one is, of course, you may have a lack of training and why people don't like them to use it. But secondly, is that people get so used to be sitting behind a desk. Mm-hmm. So one time I walked into one feed mill, and they were sitting. I said, what's doing? So they start the machine and say, we need to adjust the rolls. And I said, okay, well, you got to stop the machine. I say, no. They just went clicking and clicking, and then they will go by the noise. Mm-hmm. The moment they say the die start making a noise, or they hear a noise of the metal to metal friction, they back up 2 points or something, and now they don't. I'm like, the moment you touch that die, or there is a sound, you pretty much already start winning that die. You want to start a problem, you may be rolling holes. So they used to that, and that's where you see that, and then immediately the manager says a drastic decrease on throughput, and or the pellet mill is no longer running very well. And now what happened? The adjustment. Yes, because they just adjust the way, and that's not the right way to do it. In my opinion, is if you do that, if you decide to go through that, is how much your automation system can take control of that the best as possible, and you only have to do it the moment that it gets out of adjustment, how to properly adjust it. To close and open setups, and don't touch it anymore. Leave it alone as long as that. But you have to make sure that, one, you have the proper equipment to do that, and the automation system can have control of that. But the other thing I always recommend, Wilmer, is that if you go that direction of utilizing it, that you have some sort of control closer to the pellet mill, like the screen I was talking to you in Europe,
Mhm.
because this guy in Europe, they do have automatic self roll adjustments, but it was right there in front of it. So he can visualize, he can see it directly right there. He don't have to go to the control room. He don't have to be calling on a radio
Mhm.
and be a lap of 2 or 3 seconds between me telling closer more or stopping. Then when he hears stop, that roll went already too far. I think, in my opinion, that doesn't gonna work. If that's your way on how you're gonna do it, no, you have to have it access to right in front of the machine and being able to train the people to say, here is how you adjust it, here is where you look, here is how you do it. It's no different from you doing manually. You just do it from a screen, but you have direct contact to the equipment. So that would be my recommendation. In what I say, like I say, Wilmer, to your question, the issue is primarily lack of training, and of course the my case of from behind the desk they just go by the noise. No, that's a problem. The moment you have a metal to metal, you already have a problem there.
Yeah.
And secondly, is of course that just don't having that visibility of being able to see to how to adjust the those roles.
And it's a really good point. And as you were explaining, I think about, like, the control room might be far away from, or far from the machine, and also is in an enclosed area. So
Yeah.
you cannot truly listen what's going on outside. So that's a good point, Cesar.
It's time for our famous three. Eastman serves veterinarians and nutritionists in agrochemical and animal health industries by helping them select, evaluate, and implement innovative nutritional programs. Eastman works with your team to customize your gut health approach in feed and water. Eastman's approach addresses nutritional and bacterial challenges and finds new ingredient preservation and hygiene solutions. Explore ways to accelerate and innovate your programs. Contact the animal nutrition team at eastman.com.
And just to finish up, Cesar, maybe you can, provide some advice to our audience. How do they can keep up, with new technology or with new tools available in the feed industry?
Yes. So, Wilmer, I always encourage. There is two things. One of it is every time you have the opportunity, or your company or your boss allow you to go to a conference, to go to one of these big shows that happen around the world, like the IPPE that happens in Atlanta every year, or for example, Big Tank that happens in multiple places, almost every year, and at different places, either Brazil or the Netherlands. I think that's one of the best opportunities that you can have as someone that works in feed manufacturing, where you get the chance to interact, to talk to directly to a lot of these companies out there around the world, what they are doing, how they're embracing the multiple challenges, what type of new technology they have, and bring them back. I have copied a lot of good things out there that we've been working, testing. With our automation company, but as well challenging on some of the equipment manufacturers, especially local equipment manufacturers, who are looking on some of these things. I think that opportunity, that networking, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter where you at, but that networking, that opportunity to merge, to talk to other people, or to talk into these shows where they get an opportunity to share new technologies for this company, is one of those things that are very important. Another thing it has made a lot of difference for me. It has allowed me to learn a lot of it, to bring that knowledge back to our team members, but as well for the people that I get the opportunity to work with. Another one very important, Wilmer, that I want to mention is sometimes even the equipment manufacturers that you work with, if you go to their websites and look into resources, there is a lots of good information out there. A lot of good things that you can download. You can look things that they may be working, things that they may be developing, or things that they already have. Sometimes even you pull up a brochure for about a piece of equipment. You will learn a lot of things, in things that maybe you can compare to what you are doing in your facility, and say, this one, it shows like an opportunity to improve my efficiency. And then maybe I can use this to justify a replacement of older equipment. So that will be the two main things I think that has helped me a lot, Wilmer.
Thank you very much, Cesar, and thank you for joining us to this episode. That concludes another episode of the Fit Science Podcast Show presented by Wysenetics. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay updated on future episodes. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review, leave us some comments, and also some topics that you might like to discuss in the future. This is, your host, Wilmer Pacheco, signing off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wilmer.